In the vast, windswept plains of eastern Kazakhstan, there's a body of water that shouldn't exist. From a satellite, it's an almost perfect circle, a sapphire blue eye staring up from the brown steppe. From the shore, it looks calm, almost peaceful, but that tranquility hides the unbelievable violence of its creation. This is Lake Chagan, though locals have another name for it, the Atomic Lake. From a distance, it's serene. Up close, it holds a dark secret. This lake wasn't carved by nature. It was blasted into existence by an atomic bomb. It all started in 1965. The Soviet Union detonated a nuclear device right here, promising it would showcase the peaceful power of the atom and bring prosperity to the region. Instead, for the people who have lived in its shadow for generations, it unleashed a curse. A curse of sickness, invisible poisons, and a land that can never truly heal. This is the story of the world's first atomic lake, a tale of staggering ambition, devastating consequences, and a toxic legacy that haunts Kazakhstan to this day. To understand how a lake could be born from a nuclear fireball, we have to go back to the height of the Cold War. The US and the Soviet Union were locked in a terrifying arms race, stockpiling weapons that could wipe out civilization. But alongside this madness, a strange and audacious idea took hold in both superpowers: peaceful nuclear explosions. The logic, as wild as it sounds today, was a product of its time. The thinking went, if an atom bomb can destroy a city, couldn't it also be used to build one? Could the most destructive force known to man be used for construction? The United States launched Project Plowshare, named after the biblical prophecy of turning swords into plowshares, a brilliant bit of PR. They explored using nukes to dig canals, create harbors, and even stimulate natural gas fields. Not to be outdone, the Soviets launched their own version, Program Number 7, or Nuclear Explosions for the National Economy. And it was even more ambitious. Soviet engineers drew up plans to use over 150 nuclear detonations to literally reshape the country. They wanted to create huge reservoirs in arid lands, carve canals to connect rivers, and even use atomic blasts to put out massive gas well fires. It was a vision of total control, a belief that the atom could bend nature to humanity's will. Of course, the whole program was cloaked in secrecy, but the goal was clear: prove that Soviet science was superior and could deliver progress on an epic scale. The atom wasn't just a weapon, it was a tool for building a communist paradise. And the first major test of this doctrine, the flagship project to show the world it could be done, was set to take place in a dry riverbed in a remote part of Kazakhstan. Its name was Chagan. The location they chose was a desolate corner of the infamous Semipalatinsk test site, also known as the Polygon. This massive 18,000 square kilometer territory was the primary playground for the Soviet nuclear arsenal. Between 1949 and 1989, this region endured a relentless assault of 456 nuclear tests. Over 100 of those were atmospheric tests, detonated on towers or dropped from planes, raining radioactive fallout across the landscape with a callous disregard for anyone living there. The total explosive power unleashed at Semipalatinsk was over 250 times that of the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. This was a land already saturated with radiation. The very soil was poisoned. And it was here that the Soviets decided to detonate another bomb, this time in the name of peace. The target was the dry bed of the Chagan River. The plan was simple: use a powerful underground blast to create a giant crater. When the spring thaws arrived, the river would fill it, forming a reservoir for local farms and livestock. On paper, it was the perfect proof of concept. On January 15, 1965, they put the plan in motion. A 140-kiloton thermonuclear device was lowered into a shaft drilled 178 meters into the riverbed. For perspective, the Hiroshima bomb was about 15 kilotons. This was nearly 10 times more powerful. It was a shallow blast, designed specifically to break the surface and move as much earth as possible. At the moment of detonation, the earth heaved. In seconds, over 10 million cubic meters of rock and soil were vaporized and hurled into the air, creating a mushroom cloud that rose nearly a kilometer high. The blast tore a gaping wound in the planet, a near-perfect circle 400 meters across and 100 meters deep. The ejected rock formed a raised lip around the crater, a jagged natural dam. The Soviets hailed it as a triumph. Propaganda films show the explosion in glorious black and white, set to heroic music. You can see engineers celebrating the perfect execution of their plan. They even featured the Soviet minister in charge of the nuclear program, supposedly taking a celebratory swim in the brand new lake, though the authenticity of that is highly questionable. The message was clear. The USSR could tame the atom for the good of mankind. But there was a darker, immediate consequence. Because the explosion was designed to break the surface, it was a vented detonation. This meant an estimated 20% of the bomb's radioactive guts weren't contained underground. They were blasted into the atmosphere, along with millions of tons of pulverized, now irradiated rock. A vast, deadly plume of fallout began to drift eastward and was detected as far away as Japan. This immediately sparked protests from the US, which accused the Soviets of violating the 1963 Partial Test Ban Treaty. The Soviets just brushed it off. In their eyes, the atomic lake was a success. As spring arrived, a channel was cut, and the Chagan River began to spill into the atomic basin, filling the scar tissue of the Earth. The monster had been born. While Moscow celebrated its engineering victory, the people living downwind were beginning to pay the true price. For the hundreds of thousands living in the villages around Semipalatinsk, the Chagan test wasn't a one-off event. It was just one more injury in a 40-year-long assault on their health and their home. Kazakh experts estimate that as many as 1.5 million people were exposed to fallout from the decades of testing. During the early atmospheric tests, villagers were sometimes told to go outside to watch the beautiful lights in the sky. They were, in effect, human guinea pigs in a massive, uncontrolled experiment. They were never warned, never evacuated, and their suffering was systematically denied by Soviet authorities for decades. The fallout from Chagan and the other tests contaminated everything: the air, the water, the soil, the food. Radioactive particles entered the food chain, becoming a permanent, invisible poison passed from grass to livestock to the milk and meat that people consumed. The health consequences have been a multi-generational catastrophe that locals simply call the curse. In the years that followed, rates of cancer skyrocketed. Studies in the nearby city of Semey found rates of certain tumors were 50% higher than the national average. But the curse went deeper than cancer. It embedded itself in the very DNA of the people. One landmark study after the fall of the Soviet Union found that adults exposed to high levels of fallout showed an 80% higher rate of DNA mutations than unexposed groups. Even more terrifying, their children, who weren't even alive during the tests, had a 50% higher mutation rate. A genetic scar passed down from parent to child. The most heartbreaking result was the wave of birth defects that swept the region. For years, a horrific number of children were born with missing limbs, malformed skulls, and severe neurological disorders. The Soviet state, in its cruelty, even set up special orphanages to hide these children away, to keep the evidence of their nuclear project out of sight. The psychological toll on these communities was immeasurable, a constant state of fear, grief, and dread for what the next pregnancy might bring. This wasn't a curse of folklore. It was a curse written into their genetic code by their own government, all in the name of progress. Today, more than 60 years later, Lake Chagan is still there. The crater is a permanent scar on the landscape, and the water, a deceptively beautiful blue, still fills it. But this is not a place of life. It's a toxic kingdom, one of the most radioactive bodies of water on the planet. Immediately after the blast, radiation on the crater rim was measured at levels that would deliver a full year's worth of radiation in just a few minutes. While those intense levels have dropped, the danger hasn't gone away. It has just settled into the environment. The water in Lake Chagan remains dangerously radioactive, with concentrations of elements like tritium roughly 100 times higher than what's considered safe for drinking. The sediment at the bottom is a concentrated sludge of deadly isotopes like plutonium and cesium-137. These are poisons that will contaminate this land for thousands of years. The area is eerily quiet. Some resilient grasses grow, but there are no birds, no animals. It's as if nature itself knows to stay away. But the contamination doesn't stay put. The Chagan River, the very waterway the project was meant to control, became a delivery system for the poison. The lake was designed to overflow back into the river, and for years it did, carrying contaminated water downstream. Local farmers still use that water for their livestock. The animals drink it and graze on contaminated grasses, and the radioactive elements build up in their bodies. When people eat the meat and drink the milk, the poison gets passed on, continuing the cycle of exposure that began in 1965. Perhaps the most tragic detail of life near Lake Chagan today is the fishing. Despite the known dangers, some species of fish have survived in this radioactive soup. And local people, driven by poverty or perhaps just a grim sense of fatalism, still come here to fish. They catch these toxic fish and take them home to feed their families. A desperate gamble in a land that was sacrificed for a failed dream. As if the story weren't dark enough, some reports from the era suggest an even more sinister chapter. It seems the Soviets saw their new atomic lake not just as a reservoir, but as a unique laboratory to study the long-term effects of extreme radiation on living things. Direct evidence from the Soviet Union is hard to find, but a report from the National Nuclear Center of Kazakhstan, the very organization that now manages the former test site, paints a disturbing picture. According to this source, in the late 1960s, a new phase of experiments began at the lake. Soviet scientists allegedly introduced a whole ark of different species into the radioactive water. The list is just bizarre. It reportedly included 36 species of fish, even Amazonian piranhas, along with dozens of types of shellfish, amphibians, reptiles, and mammals. They also introduced nearly 150 species of aquatic plants. The purpose seems chillingly obvious: to see what would die, what would survive, and how the radiation would mutate them. The report concludes that, after a few years, about 90% of the introduced organisms died. The experimental station was quietly shut down in 1974. If these accounts are true, Lake Chagan wasn't just a catastrophic engineering failure. It was a deliberate, cold-blooded experiment. A place where life was intentionally thrown into a zone of death, just to see what would happen. It adds another layer of darkness to the cursed reputation of this atomic lake. The story of Lake Chagan didn't end in 1974, or even when the Semipalatinsk site was finally closed in 1991. It continues today in the quiet suffering of the people of eastern Kazakhstan, in the contaminated land, and in the eerie silence of the lake itself. Lake Chagan stands as a monumental tombstone to a dead ideology. The dream of peaceful nuclear explosions withered away, proving to be too dangerous and uncontrollable. No great canals were ever dug with atom bombs. The only lasting legacy of Program Number 7 is a collection of radioactive craters and this poisoned lake on the Kazakh steppe. It's a profound cautionary tale about the terrifying arrogance of a state that believed it could sacrifice its own people and poison its land for an ideological project. It's what happens when ambition is untethered from morality, when the human cost is willfully ignored. The Chagan test was just one of 456 blasts that scarred this region, but its legacy is uniquely visible. It's not just invisible poison in the soil, it's a landmark you can see from space, a permanent monument to the folly of the atomic age. The locals said the bomb unleashed a curse. In a way, they were right. It wasn't a curse of superstition, but the very real curse of cesium, plutonium, and strontium-90, working their slow, malevolent magic through the water, the soil, and the blood of the people. And it's a curse that will haunt this land for generations to come. The history of the Cold War is filled with secret disasters and forgotten tragedies that are only now coming to light. If you want to learn more about the dark side of our recent past, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell. For another story of Soviet atomic hubris, check out our video on the Kishtim disaster, a massive nuclear accident the USSR managed to hide for over 30 years. Thanks for watching.